What is up, YouTube? My name is Eben, and I'm finally back. My triumphant return after regionals had to be delayed a week because I had bronchitis and couldn't really get through more than like 10 seconds of talking without croaking and also sounding like I was croaking. So, might as well double entendre for those of you who care. But this is the Edge, so we're going to go ahead and get to it. I am back. We are back. We are stronger than ever. And we are starting with an unusual card that has been catching a lot of attention lately, and that is actually Steven. It's still kind of a sleeper card, but it's one you should have your eye on too. This supporter definitely did not seem like much of an anything when I first saw it when it came out in Roaring Skies. For those of you who don't know or forgot, because it is relatively forgettable, Steven lets you search your deck for a supporter card and a basic energy, reveal them, and put them into your hand, and then shuffle your deck afterward. Yeah, it's a little subpar when you compare him to some other supporters, but it's how you compare him and what you compare him to that has a lot to do with how you value, well, any card, but especially Steven. When I first saw Steven, I was thinking about cards like Skyla, for example. Now, Skyla is, of course, rotated out right now, at least out of Modified, but even in formats where she's legal, Steven seems like an inferior Skyla. He can only get supporters. He can't go and get you an item that you need, a Spirit Link or a Battle Compressor or whatever you might happen to need, an Ultra Ball. He can't get you any of those. And yes, Skyla can get supporters as well as Steven, so they do that job the same, and you have to wait a turn on both of those, but she still feels like she's superior because she can get different things. Steven does get a basic energy card in addition to that, but he feels like an inferior Skyla when you compare him to Skyla. Or if you say compare him to Corina, he feels like an inferior Corina. Corina can get you an item, which is nice, and that item could even be like, let's say, a Professor's Letter, allowing you to get 2 basic energies instead of 1 if you happen to need a basic energy, so she seems like she kind of outclasses him there in a way. Plus, she gets you a fighting Pokemon. Now, granted, that's only for fighting decks or decks that need 1 or 2 fighting Pokemon, but she still feels like, in many ways, a better choice. But I think that's where I and a lot of other players actually went wrong. It's in comparing Steven to these cards, I'm thinking of using Steven to do their job. And what Steven is actually good at is, well, like so many other cards, doing his own job. His own job is one that, like I say, people are starting to take notice of. His job in many ways is being kind of a one-of Versus Seeker target like a lot of decks are using their supporters for right now, as sort of a toolbox. And his talent is in kind of keeping your utility up in matches against things like Seismitoad EX and Vileplume. When your items may be locked, he can give you excellent starts when no one else can. And he can still be good first turn in other decks too, because he can get you the supporter you need, whatever it may be, plus guarantee you a basic energy so that your curve gets off well. And that's pretty important. Of course, as a one-of, because 4 of him would definitely be kind of inferior, because in a lot of situations he's not going to get you what you want expressly, and he'd be kind of underwhelming. So the question, of course, is, well, how do I get my one-of this early? Well, it's a fairly common trick that's being played, and you're probably aware of it. I've talked about it a little bit in some of my decks, and that's using battle compressors. Even in decks that aren't named Night March or Vespiquen, decks can still use battle compressor. What they do is they use battle compressor to send a lot of one-of copy supporters to their discard pile on the first turn. And or even you can use them mid to late in the game to get rid of cards you no longer want to draw. Extra things like, say, Force of Giant Plants that you no longer need. Things like that. But when you dump them first turn, you can then use your Versus Seeker to go get the one of your choice for the rest of the game. One common target with Battle Compressor is your single copy of Lysander. And Lysander is an incredibly powerful supporter. So it might seem counterintuitive to send it to your discard pile on turn 1, but when you're running 3 to 4 Versus Seekers, you're essentially guaranteeing that, in a way, you've always got access to it when you need it. And that's kind of the idea with Steven. Like, let's say you open turn 1, or if your opponent went turn 1 and they still haven't attacked, basically you see Seismitoad EX on the other side of the field. You know you're very likely to get Quaking Punch locked. That means your items are about to be turned off. One thing that could be very useful is to play your Battle Compressor, and of course this would mainly be pertinent only if you have a Versus Seeker, but you probably have a Versus Seeker or an out to it if you're running 4. But to go ahead and battle compress things to the discard pile, one of them would be Steven. Use Steven with your Versus Seeker as soon as you've picked out the other supporters or cards you want to send to the discard pile. Go get him. Guarantee you're going to get more cards on your next turn to keep your momentum up by getting, say, your Professor Sycamore, for example, an excellent target with him. If not the best target with Steven, realistically, in my mind. But, once again, case by case, you can make other choices. Go get this guy and get the energy. Now, it might seem like Steven in some ways is kind of an inferior professor's letter, but once again, think about the job he's doing. He's trying to get you one basic energy now so that you can dump your hand next turn. If you got two energies right away and then puked your hand in that same turn, you wouldn't be able to play them both unless you had something weird like an alpha growth Pokemon that kind of breaks the rules, but normally you wouldn't have that advantage. So in many ways, Steven is kind of getting you two energies. He's going to get you one that you can play this turn because you've already played your supporter anyway, so you can't Sycamore. And then next turn you'll play your Sycamore and be virtually guaranteed to get a second energy if you didn't already have one in your hand. And that way you're not getting extra energies or being tempted to get extra energies that you don't actually need. And remember, he's keeping up your utility in a time when other cards may not be letting you keep up your utility with items and whatnot. In fact, if you have a second Versus Seeker, there's even a school of thought that says you might even want to go ahead and Versus Seeker your Steven back a second time so that you can Steven on your second turn against the Toad before you Sycamore. Okay, maybe, maybe not, but once again, it's case sensitive. If nothing else, you could get out another card you didn't want with Steven, or guarantee an energy if you need it to, say, knock out the Toad or something like that. I mean, there are a lot of situations depending on your specific deck, but I guess what I'm trying to say here is Steven has uses. And people are starting to take notice, and that means that if your deck can employ cards like these, which I think most can, you might want to start thinking about his potentials, because cards like this are kind of the metagame right now. They're ubiquitous. They're pretty much everywhere. And so you're either ready for them, or you're prepared to kind of be at their mercy. And Steven is one of the very few cards that can go and guarantee you a supporter. Because remember, Skyla's out, so she can't really do that, and she doesn't get you the basic energy he does to help keep your momentum up. And Corina is only for a handful of decks, and she can't get you a supporter. So in many ways, while Steven doesn't do their job that well, they don't do his job that well. So anyway, food for thought, and until next time, like, comment, subscribe, check me out, and follow me on Twitter down below if you haven't already, and I will see you next time.